Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told Us podcast. So glad to have you with us. Today, we're diving deep into a life of a true American icon.
An icon whose music, I think it's fair to say, transcended genres.
Yeah, it really did and still resonates with, generations of listeners. We're talking about the Man in Black, Johnny Cash.
That's right, Johnny Cash.
We're going to unpack what made him such a legend. You know, his music, his struggles, his activism, and of course that iconic Man in Black image.
Definitely. Lots to unpack there.
Yeah. So let's get started.
Okay, well, to truly understand Johnny Cash, we need to start at the beginning. You know, his roots. He was born in Kingsland, Arkansas back in 1932, right in the heart of the Great Depression.
Oh, wow.
So, imagine growing up in a poor cotton farming family during that time. Hardship, was just a constant part of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, beyond just the economic hardship, didn't the tragic death of his older brother, Jack, that really left a deep mark on him?
It did. Cash actually carried immense guilt over that accident for years and years.
Oh, wow.
And it really shaped his worldview, and it fueled his deep faith.
I see.
Music, though, even then became a solace for him.
Oh, okay.
Gospel hymns from church, the radio tunes that filled their home, and then the Irish folk songs, he would hear those on the Jack Benny program, believe it or not.
Really?
Those all kind of helped to shape, to mold his musical sensibilities early on.
Wow. It's amazing, how those early influences, they can really shape an artist's entire trajectory.
Yeah.
And who would have guessed that the man who would become, this voice for the downtrodden actually started his journey singing gospel. Talk about a journey of self-discovery, right?
Absolutely. And there's a really interesting little story from his Air Force days that most people don't know about.
Okay.
He was stationed in Germany
Uh-huh.
as a Morse code operator, and he actually intercepted the news of Stalin's death.
Wow. Intercepting one of the biggest news stories of the century, huh?
Exactly.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time. But back to the music. So after the Air Force, he married Vivian Liberto, and they moved to Memphis.
Uh-huh.
And that was really the turning point, wasn't it?
It was. Memphis in the 1950s was a hotbed of musical creativity, and he walked into Sun Records.
Oh, wow.
The legendary studio that, launched Elvis Presley's career. And, well, the rest, as they say, is history.
Hold on, though. Wasn't it a bit more complicated than that?
Oh, yeah.
Didn't Sam Phillips, the owner of Sun Records, didn't he initially tell Cash to, go home and sin?
Yeah.
Before coming back with a song that he could sell?
He did. Phillips wasn't initially impressed with Cash's gospel leanings. He wanted something edgier, something with more grit.
Uh-huh, and Cash delivered.
Cash delivered. He recorded Hey Porter and Crack, Crack, Crack,
Right.
which launched his career in a whole new direction.
Yeah. And then came the hits, right? Folsom Prison Blues, I Walk the Line, Home of the Blues, one after another.
Oh, yeah.
And we can't forget the $1 Million Quartet jam session.
Oh, my gosh.
Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, and Johnny Cash, all in one room, making music together. For anyone who might not know, the $1 Million Quartet was this totally unplanned jam session. It was at Sun Records back in '56. Can you imagine being a fly on the wall for that?
That would have been something else.
Oh, man.
It was a pivotal moment in music history, 4 future legends just letting loose and creating this magic. And it really solidified Cash's place in that burgeoning rock and roll scene.
It's incredible to think how these seemingly random events can shape the course of music history.
Yeah.
But, even as his star was rising, Cash began battling those personal demons, didn't he?
He did.
The addiction, reckless behavior, and the run-ins with the law. It wasn't all sunshine and roses.
No, definitely not. And this is where we start to see that, outlaw image really start to emerge.
Oh, okay.
The infamous forest fire incident, the multiple arrests, that wild, untaped energy, it all kind of became part of his persona, and it even fueled his music.
Yeah. And for our listeners who might not be as familiar with the term outlaw country,
right.
It was this movement in country music that really rejected that polished commercial Nashville sound.
Yes.
It was raw, it was rebellious, and it often dealt with themes of, heartbreak, rebellion, and life on the fringes of society.
Exactly. And Cash embodied that spirit perfectly. And he was a walking contradiction, deeply religious, yet prone to temptation, a devoted family man who struggled with addiction.
Right.
This complexity is part of what made him so fascinating.
That's a reminder that even our biggest heroes, they're human.
Right.
With flaws and struggles, just like the rest of us. And speaking of human connections, this is around the time that he met June Carter, right?
It is.
A relationship that would change his life forever.
Absolutely. Their love story was legendary. She really became his anchor, helped him navigate through his darkest hours, and she inspired some of his most beautiful love songs. Jackson, their duet, it's a prime example.
Yeah, good.
Pure musical chemistry.
Before we dive even deeper into the Man in Black era and Cash's transformation, I want to just encourage you all to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of our deep dive into the life of Johnny Cash.
Yeah, we'll be back to talk about how this outlaw country star transformed into a true voice for social justice, the Man in Black. And we're back. We left off talking about Johnny Cash's outlaw years and his connection with June Carter.
Yeah.
And it was actually during this time, as his bond with June deepened, that we see something really interesting happened.
Okay.
He went through a pretty profound transformation, and his music started to reflect this a much deeper social conscience.
Yeah, it's almost like he shed that outlaw skin and emerged as like a different kind of rebel, right?
Right, exactly.
This is really where the Man in Black truly comes into focus.
This is it. It became, more than just a stage persona. It was a statement.
Yeah, right.
That simple, stark black attire. It really became the symbol of solidarity. With, the downtrodden, the forgotten, the marginalized,
Right.
He was speaking for those who didn't have a voice.
Yeah. It's always struck me how deliberate that choice was.
It was.
Cash wasn't just wearing black for dramatic effect. He was really making a statement about who he stood with.
Yeah.
But for someone who might be listening and they're not as familiar with his music,
right.
What are some specific examples of how this social conscience, how it kind of manifested in his work?
Okay, well, one of the most powerful examples is his album Bitter Tears, Ballads of the American Indian.
Oh, wow.
Now, this was incredibly controversial when it was released back in 1964.
I bet.
Because, see, Cash was deeply moved by the plight of Native Americans, and he wanted to bring their stories to light.
I can imagine that didn't go over very well with everybody back then.
You're right. Some radio stations actually refused to play the album's most poignant track, and that was the Ballad of Ira Hayes.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this song told the story of a Pima Indian who was one of the Marines who raised the flag at Iwo Jima.
Right.
A true American hero.
Right, yeah.
But despite his wartime heroism, Hayes faced incredible racism and just, deep poverty when he returned home.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. And I can see how a song that directly addressed those injustices, especially during that era, would ruffle some feathers.
It did. It really challenged that prevailing narrative about Native Americans, and it exposed the hypocrisy of a nation that celebrated their wartime contributions while simultaneously ignoring their struggles.
Wow.
Cash faced quite a backlash, but he didn't back down. He actually bought ad space in Billboard magazine to criticize those radio stations that were censoring his music.
Wow, that's standing up for your convictions. It makes those prison concerts at Folsom and San Quentin even more powerful, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he was deliberately choosing to amplify the voices of people who were, so often just ignored or silenced.
Absolutely. Those concerts, they weren't just performances. They were acts of empathy, of solidarity. Cash didn't shy away from the darkness and the hardship of prison life. He embraced it.
Yeah.
He sang about the struggles of the inmates, their hopes, their despair.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he really humanized them in the eyes of a public that often viewed them as simply criminals.
I've always wondered, what the atmosphere was actually like at those concerts.
Yeah.
Was it somber, defiant? What do you think drew him to performing in those spaces?
Well, from the recordings and the accounts of those who were there, you can really feel this palpable sense of shared humanity, this recognition of this common ground that connects us all, regardless of our circumstances. Cash saw that. He saw the inherent dignity in those men.
Okay.
And in turn, they saw someone who understood their pain and actually gave voice to their stories.
And those albums at Folsom Prison and at San Quentin, those weren't just critically acclaimed. They were massive commercial successes.
Huge, yeah.
Those performances, they transcended those physical walls of the prison.
They did.
And they reached this much wider audience.
Yes.
Sparking conversations about, prison reform.
Yep.
And challenging societal perceptions of incarcerated individuals.
You got it. And it's a testament to the power of music to bridge those divides and just challenge our assumptions.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just those prison concerts. You remember the Johnny Crash show?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That was groundbreaking television for its time.
Totally. I mean, here was this country music icon, inviting artists like Bob Dylan, Neil Young, Chris Christopherson,
Yep.
these artists who are really pushing boundaries and challenging the status quo.
Exactly. He wasn't afraid to showcase those diverse voices.
Yeah.
And give a platform to, those who are really challenging those societal norms. It reflected his own open-mindedness and willingness to break down those barriers.
Yeah, it's inspiring to see how he used his platform, to amplify those voices.
Uh-huh.
He wasn't just an entertainer, he was a cultural force, using his influence to really advocate for change.
That's right.
It makes you think about how artists today can use their platforms
Yeah.
to raise awareness about important issues.
Absolutely. It's a powerful legacy to consider. And, even though Cash faced those struggles of his own,
Right.
especially with addiction, he never stopped evolving. And you mentioned the American Recordings earlier.
Yeah.
That series produced by Rick Rubin in the 90s
Yep.
really revitalized his career.
Uh-huh.
It's fascinating how Rubin, who was known for his work with hard rock and hip hop acts,
Right.
he saw something special in this, aging country legend.
And we're back with the final part of our Johnny Cash deep dive.
That's right.
We've been talking about his incredible journey from those early gospel roots all the way to becoming the Man in Black.
Yeah.
A voice for the voiceless. But his story, it doesn't end there. He kept creating, kept evolving right up to the very end.
Absolutely. Even as he, faced health challenges later in life,
Yeah.
that creative spirit never dimmed. And speaking of challenges, you mentioned the American Recordings.
Right.
Those albums produced by Rick Rubin,
Yeah.
those really revitalized his career in the 90s.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how Rubin, known for his work with hard rock and hip hop,
Yeah.
saw something special in this aging country legend.
Right. It seems like such an unlikely pairing on the surface, doesn't it?
It does.
But Rubin, he had this knack for stripping things back
Yeah.
to their essence.
Right.
And with Cash, that really meant focusing on the voice, the storytelling, the raw emotion
Yes.
that had always been at the heart of his music.
Exactly. Rubin, he understood that Cash's strength was really, in his authenticity, his ability to just connect with listeners
Yeah.
on a deeply personal level. And by stripping away all that elaborate production that had become so common in country music,
Right.
he allowed Cash's voice and his lyrics to just take center stage. And it was a revelation for so many listeners, old and new.
Yeah, for me, one of the most powerful moments on those American recordings is that cover of Hurt
Oh, yeah.
by 9 Inch Nails.
Incredible.
It's such a haunting and vulnerable performance. You can hear a lifetime of experience of pain and resilience in every note.
It's true. That song and that video, they're so moving. You see Cash, frail, nearing the end of his life,
Yeah.
grappling with his legacy, his regrets, his humanity. And it's a testament to his artistry, that he could take a song written by, a much younger artist
Right.
from a completely different genre and just make it completely his own.
It speaks to the universality of human emotions, doesn't it?
It does.
Whether you're, a young rocker or an aging country legend,
Right.
we all go through love and loss and pain and hope.
We do.
And Cash, through his music, he could tap into those shared experiences in a way that very few artists can.
Absolutely. And even though, his health was declining, he still had that mischievous spark.
Yeah, yeah.
Remember that time he got kicked by an ostrich on his farm?
Wait, what? He got attacked by an ostrich.
He did. It sounds like something out of one of his songs, doesn't it?
It really does.
Apparently, he got a little too close to this ostrich, and it kicked him, causing, a pretty serious injury.
Only Johnny Cash.
I know.
It just adds to his legend, doesn't it? This larger-than-life figure.
Yeah.
But also had these moments of unexpected humor
Yeah.
and vulnerability. It does. It's pretty amazing.
And even with, all these health challenges, he went and formed the Highwaymen with Waylon Jennings,
Right,
Willie
right.
Nelson, and Chris Christopherson. Talk about a country music supergroup.
Oh, wow.
They toured and they recorded together,
Yeah.
bringing their own outlaw spirit to a new generation.
It's amazing to think that his career spanned, decades influencing so many different artists and genres. And tragically, he died just 4 months after June Carter back in 2003.
That's right.
You know, they were inseparable in life, and now they rest side by side.
Yes.
You know, a testament to their enduring love story.
It's true. Their love story was remarkable. They supported each other through, thick and thin, through personal struggles and creative triumphs. They were partners in every sense of the word, and their bond inspired countless people.
And even though they're both gone, their music continues to live on. Johnny Cash's legacy, it's immense. He broke down barriers between genres.
Yes.
Just challenged societal norms.
He did.
Gave voice to the voiceless, and reminded us all of the power of empathy and compassion.
Well said. His music, it still resonates with people from all walks of life. It speaks to the human condition, to our shared experiences of joy and sorrow, love and loss, hope and despair. He was a true American original, a voice that will never be forgotten.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I can't help but think that how much richer and deeper our understanding of Johnny Cash becomes when we go beyond the surface.
Yes.
When we explore not just the music, but the man behind it.
That's right.
The struggles, the contradictions, the triumphs.
It's a reminder that true artistry often comes from a place of, depth and complexity. And for those listening, we encourage you to delve deeper into Cash's music, to discover your own connections to his stories.
It's been a real privilege to explore his life and music with you today.
It has.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Johnny Cash, the Man in Black.
The Man in Black.
And we'll see you next time on Tell Me More Stories Told His podcast.